guys, Brian here. We're back with FROSTBITE JL, and today we're going to be putting a new lift on the Jeep. I'm pretty excited. It's going to be the Metalcloak 2.5-inch Rocksport Game-Changer. So it does come with all 8 arms, your track bars, you get sway bar disconnects in the front, and we also went with their bump stops as well. Alright, so let's check out what we get with this one. So this is the Game-Changer kit. So you do get all 8 arms, and they do have a nice coating on them that'll help against rust and corrosion. You also get both front and rear track bars. That one's actually the front, this is the rear, and then you get coils. These are going to be the 2.5-inch for a JL. And then I also went with their bump stops here, and these ones are kind of cool. They're kind of accordion style, so they'll compress slowly so you don't get hard hits when you come off a ledge and stuff. So those should be a nice addition. You get sway bar disconnects for the front and the new links in the rear. You get the Rocksport shocks, and then they do include a bit of grease if you want to service these joints. They are serviceable and rebuildable, which is nice. And then your box of all your additional parts. You get bump stops and all that sort of thing. So some of the special tools you're going to need are you're going to need a step bit. You're going to drill out a few holes for your shock mounts. So these are pretty nice. They're kind of spendy, but they work great, so they're good to have. You also need a little grinding bit. Got this on Amazon. I'll put a link down below. But you will need to actually go ahead and oval out a little bit of the track bar mount on the front to fit that big joint. And then you want some anti-seize. We're going to go ahead and anti-seize all of the threads on those so they don't seize up. And then you do need some channel locks. We are going to be disconnecting the rear parking brake and rerouting it under the cross member. And then you'll need a little crowbar. We're going to be pulling off the front brake line bracket. And then you'll need a large adjustable wrench. I just got this pipe wrench to kind of tighten down the jam nuts on the joints once we're all done. Also helps to have an impact wrench. And then I also went and rented from AutoZone. You can also buy these at Harbor Freight, but this is going to be a spring compressor. So what we'll do is we'll pop those on the side and we can bring them down about an inch or two, help them fit into the vehicle better so we don't have to drop the axle as much. So this video is going to be fairly brief. I'm going to try to keep it brief. A lot of people have seen lift videos already, and there's also a lot out there that are pretty good. So I'm just going to go over the main things that are different with the Metalcloak lift. There are a few brackets for the front shocks, and then sway bar disconnects are a little different, and then doing these arms are a little different. So I'll try to include all that, so if you are doing this specific lift on a JL, you'll be able to see all that. And then also I'm going to do some before shots and some after so you can see how much height we actually gain. These 2.5-inch coils are for a fully loaded Jeep, so we should get quite a bit more lift than 2.5. The Jeep currently has a 2-inch spacer lift on it from AEV. Rides really nice because it's OEM spec coils, so it's pretty soft. But we do have the added weight on the front, and we do need to bring it up a little. So going to a full suspension, especially with the adjustable arms, will be a nice upgrade. And then we should gain a decent amount of clearance in case we want to go to a larger tire. So stay tuned. We pulled the e-brake bracket, so this is what it looks like, and it holds the e-brake cables up in right there. So what you got to do is you got to get a long extension, a 13mm, and you'll snake it right up here, and you can zip these off. And that already released a lot of tension on these. What we're going to end up doing is disconnecting these down from the axle, right there and right there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to pull them back over these lines and run them underneath to give us extra slack on these e-brake cables while we're off-roading. So now that we got this little bracket off, let's go ahead and unhook them down here. So now to disconnect them down here, what we're going to do is we have the e-brake hold, and then we're going to clamp channel locks right up against there. And we'll do that on both sides, right there. And then we'll release the parking brake. And then what that'll do is that'll give us a little tension on this. Do that clip there. And then what we'll do is we'll disconnect it here, the axle, and then we can reroute those. Got those clamped on both sides. We went and released the e-brake, so that gives us no slack. Pull those guys right out. So let's go ahead and get it unhooked here with our 13mm. All right, so what we have is our 13mm closed end, and we're going to slide these over the tongs here. What that does is that presses it down just enough to pull that guy right out. See? So now we're loose on this side. We'll do that on the other side and then route those over the top. So now we got those rerouted underneath the cross member, underneath the fuel lines. And they'll come down and they'll go right over here, and we'll get those reconnected. And then we should be all set. All right, so now that we rerouted those e-brake cables, you can kind of see we got way more room for flexing there. You want to unhook your breather hose before you lay all this down. Then you also unhook your brakes down here at the control arm mount, and then up here as well. So as you see, everything's loose, and if you look in here real close, our coil's just sitting here. This was our old spacer lift, and the coil's just loose in here. So now we can go ahead and we can put the new coils and the new shocks on. Alright, so here's just a quick comparison of the rears. So here's going to be our new Metalcloak 2.5-inch lift coil, and then here's going to be the factory one. You can see there's quite a bit taller coil, and then you also have a heavier duty wound here, so that'll help with payload. And then if you also look at the new Rocksport shocks, they have way more, at least 6 inches or so of droop. So that should give us way more flex in the rear. So that's why we rerouted those cables, and then we'll want those new control arms to help with the articulation. So that's just a quick comparison. All right, and then here's that 2-inch AEV spacer we pulled off. So if you kind of look, we're going to gain at least a couple inches, plus this is also going to be a heavier duty coil, so we should get a decent amount of lift after. All right, so another thing we did get the bump stops as well, so I just put a little dishwash soap on here. So what you do is you just kind of twist those guys, pull them out. You can see the height difference. This actually compresses the same as this. It's just more progressive, so you should get a nicer ride out of it. And then this, since I put that dish soap on there you go. Just slide right up in there, and that's what it'll look like. So let's go ahead and we'll get the coils in, and then we'll put on some of our bump stops, and we'll get the rear buttoned up. Alright, another thing that's interesting about this lift is these bump stops Metalcloak provides. So they do have a bunch of holes in them. We got both sides going. This first one's going to take an Allen, and then a 13mm down the bottom. It's a locking one. And they do want you to set it up on the outboard one on the driver's side and on the inboard one on the passenger side. So on the driver's side, it puts it right up against the track bar mount. Then on the passenger side, it's more center. But once you get that on, you flip this over to side B, and then you use wood screws to kind of tack these into the next one. So I'm going to put 3 of these guys on. That should be about right for my lift height and tires, and I'll show you what that looks like. Alright, so I went ahead and brought the axle all the way up to where the bump stops touch. If you do see, these staggered ones do end up touching that bump stop on that side. And they do as well over here. So everything looks good. I think we'll stick with those 3. Let's go ahead and we'll drop it down. We'll get the coils and then the control arms in. Alright, so I'm just getting ready to put the tires back on. We went ahead and got everything on here. We got the shocks on here, and they're they're torqued down to spec. Got their new longer sway bar end length, so they're torqued down. We actually added these little spacers here, and we used their longer hardware. Those are 17mm, and torque those down as well. Use blue Loctite on everything. Got our bump stops in, got our coils in. that passenger side coil was kind of struggle to get that in with this isolator up on top, so you had to kind of zip tie those up in there because it's pushing on the gas tank with the axle all the way drooped. But what I did was I went ahead and jacked the axle up. I put a little jack stand underneath the pinion, so then I was able to let the axle down and line these holes up. Made it pretty easy. You just do one at a time, and then you can go ahead and tighten up your jam nuts there. You do have the little flag nuts. The one on the passenger side is quite hard to do. I found that if you just get some pliers and hold it, you can hold enough pressure to line it up and get it set up. So we're going to go ahead and get the wheels and tires back on. We're going to lower it down. I'm going to do the lowers on the ground. It's a little easier that way. And then the rear's all done. And we go ahead and we'll torque down the track bar and our control arms once it's on the ground so we don't bind the bushings. But then we'll flip it around. We will do the front in the morning. All right. And then one more thing on these bump stops, I did have to take the upper two off so I could get to this nut. Once this is torqued down to spec, I will go ahead and put those last two back on there with those little wood screws, and then we should be all set. All right, guys, we're finished up with the front. I'll have you come on in. We'll take a look at some of the stuff we did that's a little bit different than our regular lift. So with the Rocksport shocks and the Game-Changer, you do get outboard shock mounts. All right, so if you come on in here and take a look at the Rocksport shocks, they do come with new brackets that outboard the shock a little bit. So you do have to come in here with a step bit and drill out this hole. And you're just widening it out a little bit from the stock mount for the brake lines. And then you put in a crush sleeve and a bolt in the bottom. And that'll bring it out so when you flex out, you don't hit on the frame here. And then you can also see our control arms there. Jam nuts are up here as well. Another thing you do need to do is you do need to take the little brake line brackets off these guys. They're a little bit of a pain, but if you use a pry bar, you can get them off. Show you what that looks like. This is going to be a pried off one. So you do have to fight them a little bit, but you just pry that back and then you're able to get those guys free. Then you also want to, on the axle disconnect, you also want to disconnect all these connections so you got a nice bit of droop there for you. So another thing that's kind of cool with the Metalcloak, you do get these hockey puck style bump stops, so they're kind of cool. You can slide them in after the fact. You do need to drill that hole out to a 1/2 inch with the step bit, but then you can slide all the hardware in here and you don't have to try to juggle it with the coil. And then you'll see our accordion style bump stop there. And then you got sway bar disconnects. The passenger side does have a little bracket, raises it up so it is a little shorter than on the driver's side. Then what you'll do, I haven't installed them yet, is you'll put little L brackets right up here, and then you can swing them up out of the way when you're off-roading. And then also here's our track bar. So one thing you do have to do with this new track bar, you do have to go ahead and widen the hole to fit that big joint in there. So that was quite tedious. You do have to get a metal bit, and I will show you kind of what that looks like after we're all done. I did have to widen it out quite a bit, but it does fit in there now. And I am pretty happy with how it drives. So that's pretty much it for the front components, similar to a regular lift. Like I said, this is going to just be a quick overview. Kind of go over what you get with the Metalcloak Game-Changer specifically. So now let's go ahead and we'll throw the tire back on and we'll take some measurements. Also guys, one more thing I wanted to point out. When you're going ahead and adjusting your upper and lower control arms, in the rear I followed the Metalcloak instructions. They do widen it, the wheel base, just a little bit, brings them back about 1/8 of an inch. That'll also rotate your pinion down. And then the front, I kind of deviated a little bit. What I did is I went with the factory length up top, and then I also matched the length of my previous TerraFlex Sport control arms. They were 24 and 5/8, so they're 5/8 of an inch longer than a regular control arm. It's a little different than what Metalcloak wants. They wanted factory length on the lowers and then shortening the upper, which would actually decrease your wheelbase. I decided to go ahead and just longer the lowers and then keep the factory upper length. And we ended up getting pretty spot on caster. I was aiming between 6 and 7 degrees, and it was 6.7 degrees is what we ended up with. So that worked out great. Another trick you have when you are lining these up, what you do is you'll just put them right next to each other with the adjustable ones, and you can put your bolts through each end, and that's how you know you got them the perfect length, so you don't end up with a cockeyed axle for you. So yeah, this is all the parts we removed. Quite a bit of stuff, but let's go ahead and see how much lift we actually got out of it. Alright, so now that we have it back on the ground, you make sure you've torqued all your control arm nuts and your track bars, and you went around and torqued all your wheels to spec, and then go ahead and tighten all your jam nuts as well. We're going to have you come in here, we're going to take a look at what we gained as far as height wise. It was 31 inches in the front, and now we are at about 33 and a half. So we gained about 2.5 inches on the front. Let's go ahead and check the back and see about how much we got. All right, we'll take a look at the back here. We are just at about 34 inches. So we gained about 2 inches in the back. So 2.5 in the front, about 2 in the back over the stock coils and the 2-inch AEV spacer lift. So that's about what I expected with these heavier duty springs. I do like the look of it. It does drive great. I have actually driven it around the road for a day or so, and it has settled slightly from when I originally put it on. So let's go ahead and we'll talk about how I like it, and then we'll finish up here. All right, guys, that's going to do it for the Metalcloak 2.5-inch Rocksport Game-Changer lift here on the FROSTBITE JL. I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. I ended up getting about 2.5 inches lift overall from my spacer lift, which is what I needed. I wanted a little more wheel gap here for when we go off-road and we can articulate, especially with that heavier winch and bumper on the front. My old setup sagged quite a bit in the front, so this is definitely nice. The alignment came out well. All they had to do was change the toe, which was something we didn't touch, and then straighten the steering wheel out. So everything else turned out great, the thrust angle and the caster and whatnot. Like I said, we got it right at 6.7, so that's ideal. Does ride great on the road. It is a little bit firmer, but not in a bad way. You're able to take corners quite a bit smoother and faster. You don't have as much body roll. And it also feels like it accelerates and brakes better because you're not getting the rocking motion as much. But I will do an update. I'll let you guys know how this turns out. Like I said, overall, I'm really happy with it. We'll go ahead and show you some shots with the lift on there, and you can see the before and after and decide what you think. Alright guys, so that's going to do it for this install. Like I said, it's a pretty brief one. There are several videos out there that show in-depth ways of installing lift. So I just kind of wanted to show you the differences between the Metalcloak and possibly other manufacturers as well. So don't forget to like, subscribe. We do have some trips planned. Hopefully we're able to still do those this summer, as long as we're not sheltered in place. I hope you guys are all staying healthy out there and safe. Go ahead and click the like and subscribe button and stay tuned for the next one. See you guys.